Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the fusedlogic podcast. This is episode 3 of season 2 in 2017. Ready for countdown? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition, liftoff.
When some folks think of cool video games, they think Candy Crush on Facebook. And man, I just shuddered even a little bit just saying that out loud. Please don't send in your request to join that game anymore. But we've got another massively cool interview coming up here on the fusedlogic podcast. This is episode 3 of season 2, and I'm your host, Walter Schwabe. Hold on to your game controllers because here comes Commander Shepard. Now, Mass Effect fans will be going crazy right now as they know that Mark Meer is Commander Shepard, of course, and Mark is a multi-award winning Canadian actor, writer, all of, funny guy and incredibly talented individual. And yeah, that's right. He's actually a virtual character in a really cool video game too, and an Edmontonian. Mark, welcome to the fusedlogic podcast.
Thanks very much for having me, Walter.
So, yeah, I'm not kidding when I say loads of serious gamers who play first-person shooter games and role-playing games have no doubt heard of Mass Effect and, of course, your character, Commander Shepard. But before we kind of get into that sort of that work that you've done, and a whole lot of it, I want to ask you some questions about why you became an actor. So when did you first sort of know that that was the role or in life that you were going to take and the path you were going on?
Not until I got into improv, which was later than a lot of folks do. I didn't actually take drama in high school because I went to high school in a very small town. So when I was introduced to improv, that really got me more into thinking of theater as a career and acting in general.
So, okay, improv. Now, did you just wake up one morning and go, yeah, improv's where it's at. I think that's what I'm going to do. Or, were you kind of like the clown in your family, clowning around all the time and always had a quick, snappy comeback and you just fell into it? Or
no, as I say, I didn't actually do much theater or drama in high school, but I'd always been a fan of sketch comedy, SCTV, Saturday Night Live, Kids in the Hall, and I'd never really thought about doing it as a career until I did a show called with 3 Dead Trolls and a Baggy at the Teen Festival of the Arts at the Citadel Theater here in the early 90s. And I was in university at that point, and I sort of signed up for this show because I'd seen the Teen Fest before, and it was great. And they introduced me to improv as a tool for writing sketch comedy. And everybody else, of course, had much experience with improv through high school and whatnot, but I'd never been exposed to it before. I had, of course, been exposed to many people who did improv, again, the casts of SCTV and Saturday Night Live and so on, and it was a real eye-opener for me. I often actually say that my first acting experience in high school and such was Dungeons & Dragons. That's what really got me into acting.
Well, okay, now I know that now I think we could probably easily, if we wanted to, segue right into why you role play and do the video game side of things as well. But SCTV, I mean, there's so many great characters that group of incredibly talented actors over the years developed and made their own. Who would be your all-time favorite SCTV character, bar none?
Hard to pick. It would probably be a triumvirate of the monster chiller horror theater guys. So Count Floyd, Dr. Tongue, and Bruno.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh, man.
Though, I mean, all of SCTV is gold. Guy Caballero, for sure. Oh, he's up there. Mrs. Brickley. There's many brilliant characters on that show.
I this weekend, I have no doubt I'm just going to go and I'm just going to start watching some of those clips. I mean, it's I can see why it would be an inspiration, for you. And I mean, it was an inspiration for laughter for me and most likely a whole lot of our listeners. But, to be able to sort of use that as inspiration, one of your inspirations anyways. So how cool would it be, if we were able to, maybe see you do something with, say, John Candy if he was still around today?
Well, I mean, obviously, I never had the pleasure. He was one of my childhood heroes for sure. Although, I mean, I have had the opportunity to work with another one of my childhood heroes, Joe Flaherty from SCTV. And I've worked with Joe on several TV shows and in live theater as well. That was how we first met, was when he came to do Dynasty at the Varscona Theater, which is our live improvised soap opera. And subsequently, Joe did one of his own down in Los Angeles. I went down and did that. And he still comes to Edmonton on occasion. Like we see him at the Capitol Theater, where Dana Anderson is the artistic director, and Dana's brought Joe in for a number of improvised sort of Dynasty-style shows with the cast of Dynasty as well.
Yeah, that's a an amazing talent. Always enjoyed his work, and a very funny man. I think there's this is the great thing about Canada. I think that we're a talented country in a multitude of levels. We've got incredibly smart scientists. We have incredibly talented hockey players, obviously. We have, really smart business people, but we're also very funny as a culture. When you think about some of those icons like Joe Flaherty and John Candy and many, many others, obviously. I mean, we can go on. We're really graced with a lot of talent, such as yourself. What would you say would be something that our industry, as an entertainment industry in general, whether it's on stage or, in front of the camera or whatever, in front of a microphone, what would you say is desperately needed right now in terms of the country as a whole?
What's desperately needed?
Yeah.
Well, I suppose the same thing that's always needed, which is a chance to poke fun at the hilarious and stupid things that people do, and hope that they correct them.
Well, I mean, you do that pretty regularly with some compadres on the Irrelevant show on CBC pretty regularly, don't you?
That's true. We do have, we've been running for several seasons now, many seasons with the Irrelevant show. Though Irrelevant show tends to be, and that was its whole reason for being, was not necessarily looking at current events or political stuff, and instead doing, sketches about Darth Vader.
Yeah, right. Well, or what, you guys, you did this song about, the Senate, right?
We do occasionally delve into relevancy on the Irrelevant show.
Yeah. It's funny stuff, actually. In fact, it was highlighted to me when I was preparing for this interview. I was just generally talking with some folks, and one of your biggest fans of the Irrelevant show is here in Edmonton, and his name is Robert, and he just make sure you say hi to Mark. I listen to that show all the time, and so yeah, you definitely got fans across the board on multiple levels in terms of the kind of work that you do. There's no doubt. So when you started going from, say, improv, and you crossed over into now part of your career, obviously a serious part of your career is working, on projects, not only, I suppose, Bioware projects, but, you had the opportunity to take on Commander Shepard as a role for a video game. What was kind of going through your head when you were approached with the opportunity?
Well, I was extremely excited, of course. I had been working on the game before that point. I'd sort of been doing basically pitches for how the aliens would sound and things like that, mostly for the designers. And so I was pretty sure I'd get some alien work on it. But to be asked to audition for the lead and then subsequently get callbacks and eventually get it, yeah, that was amazing. I was thrilled. Being, again, like a nerdy fellow myself, getting to be the lead in a video game was a dream come true.
Yeah, I mean, if you have any care in the world about video games or, that kind of thing, and then just even being able to consult on it on some level like you were, but then, that must have been a very cool day. So that when you, thought about doing that work, how different is, I mean, obviously you spent a lot of time in studio, but how different is it to prepare for that kind of project and that role than it would be, say, doing something like, on screen or other types of acting on stage?
Well, a lot of stuff in video games, especially voice work in general, but particularly in video games, you don't get a lot of prep time. You generally are going in, you won't have seen your dialogue before you do the recording session. So it's what amounts to a cold read. Of course, you do multiple takes, but you do have to be able to hit the ground running when you're doing stuff behind the mic.
So you basically just got to be in.
So I was just going to say, improv, of course, helps with that immensely. So I always recommend improv as a great tool for any branch of acting, but most particularly in voice acting, I find improvs come in handy.
So I've asked, Ron Peterson this question, and I asked him about, when doing improv, do you have to think faster? Does your brain have to move faster? I mean, obviously our brains move pretty fast most of the time, I suppose. Maybe in my case, not as much. But, do you have to think faster on your feet when you're doing improv work?
Well, one of the tenets of improv is not to overthink things or don't think too much or try too hard to be clever. And in fact, a lot of improv exercises and training is about being able to just say the first thing that comes to mind and being able to accept offers. And it's not so much about like, aha, what a zinger I formulated. You just sort of give in to the narrative of the scene that you're doing, and the funny comes naturally.
So you really have to be in the moment, I guess.
Yeah, being in the moment, of course, is, again, one of the central ideas of improv.
What, in terms of the work you've done across all mediums, what has maybe been the most challenging role that you've ever sort of taken on and tackled?
The most challenging role? Well, in some ways, Commander Shepard was a challenging role because you, of course, had to be, especially with that role, and Jennifer Hale, who played the female Commander Shepard, had the same challenge. You had to be almost anything to anyone. And we had different pathways for the dialogue, either Paragon or Renegade. But at the same time, there was some dialogue that was shared between them. So finding the balance in that was sometimes difficult. And of course, we had great directors to help us out with that. And it was a very interesting role because, of course, Commander Shepard, there is no defined Commander Shepard. Everybody who played the game had their own version of Commander Shepard, who could have been anything from a completely selfless Boy Scout to a borderline psychopath. So finding that balance was interesting.
So when you think about, you do a little research online, and I don't know, do you tend to watch your fans' reactions to your work, either, in the media online or just, do you tend to, pay attention to any of that?
Well, I of course am fortunate enough to get to meet the fans in person at conventions and such. And just meeting the fans is actually one of the best parts of this whole gig. The amazingly creative stuff that I've seen at conventions in terms of costume, in terms of little keepsakes and gifts that people have given me. It's really amazing. And they are quite vocal about how much they love the game. And that's really humbling to get to be part of something that people embraced so much. Going to big conventions and seeing the massive array of that little pun there, but massive array of costumes and again the creativity behind it.
It really does take a lot of commitment to play any serious video game today. I poke fun at Candy Crush and those kinds of types of games. There's an audience for that, but the kinds of games we're talking about. I'm
into mobile games myself, so.
Well, I know, and I do too. Not that one, but I do too. And the thing is that they're obviously designed for a bit more impatience and more, faster rewards on some levels. But when you look at the kinds of games that you've been a part of, Mass Effect, Baldur's Gate, Dragon Age. These are a much bigger production, right? And certainly much more complex.
As I say, I have done work in those other games as well. We actually had a few games that tied into the TV show that I did on Super Channel called Tiny Plastic Men. And what were the games? There were Kitten Assassin was one of them, which was basically a shooter, and which was based on a toy and cartoon from within the show. And and also, of course, I've done most recently. I did a game called Slay Away Camp. Which was just released on iOS on Valentine's Day, I believe, which is basically a salute to slasher and horror films of the 1980s, but it's a puzzle game essentially with, in the guise of a slasher from 1985 or so.
Right, right. So when you think about the career direction that you're on, and obviously back in high school, you coming out of it and going into university, you're doing some improv and stuff. I don't think you were sitting there coloring on your binder in school saying, I'm going to be in a video game. But when you look at your career today, or maybe you were, but when you look at a career today, and where you see the opportunities for Canadian actors in general, what sort of opportunities are you really excited about in terms of the way things are going?
Well, I'd have to bring Edmonton into it, actually, because here we've managed to... Oh, hold on one second. Sorry, dog is barking.
I noticed you said kittens, not dogs, because obviously you're a dog owner, and so that's why we're picking on kittens, I guess, with Tiny Plastic Man.
Oh, no, actually, well, the basis of Kitten Assassin was that you played a kitten who was an assassin, and your targets were usually dictators who were dogs.
Okay, there we go, obviously. Oh,
yeah, there you go.
Well, now I really want to play that game.
Okay, so sorry, where were we? What were we?
We were talking about where you see opportunities going, where you're most excited about what's coming up. And
well, again, we've managed to create a bunch of opportunities for ourselves here in Edmonton with Tiny Plastic Man, of course, which I mentioned before, and another show that Mosaic Entertainment produces, which is Caution May Contain Nuts, which is making its comeback after several years' absence. We were on APTN, and we just finished shooting a new season. I think the gap was almost a 5-year gap in between series, but we've done 3 seasons, and we've just got another one coming out. So I spent all last fall shooting stuff for that, and we're pretty happy with the way it looks.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, there's actually quite a number of Dungeons and Dragons sketches in this season.
Okay, well, you're going
Star
back
Trek
to
stuff
to some of your roots as a kid, maybe.
Yeah.
So when, the city of Edmonton is rich with theater talent, there's no doubt about that. And we have a really strong, I think we could have a stronger film industry here. I think probably Calgary's film industry is a bit stronger than Edmonton's, obviously.
Could be on a bit stronger, but yeah.
But we've got this, world-beating, video game developer that we all know and love, I guess, on some level, if you're a video game player that you like their titles. Certainly that helps. How do you see technology like, say, virtual reality and, that kind of stuff playing into a role here?
In terms of playing into a role?
Well, it's going to be changing. It already is and has changed the gaming industry, and it'll continue to do that as, obviously Oculus Rift and this technology comes out and becomes more.
We're talking specifically about the VR.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I've just actually been watching recently a few of those 360 movies. The ones that you wear the headset with, that you stick your phone in and sort of like a visor. Yeah, it's quite cool, and definitely an interesting thing to shoot. A friend of mine, Chris Craddock, who I work on with Tiny Plastic Man and Caution May Contain Nuts, he just shot a zombie short in that format, which I look forward to seeing.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so when you're surrounded by these talented friends of yours and colleagues, how exciting is it to hear about sort of these guys doing, really cool things like what you just said, this, 3D short, right? Or 360-degree short of zombies, that kind of thing. It's each one of those projects is a win sort of for the Canadian industry, if you will, on some level, I would think. And so do you find yourself kind of cheering and saying, yeah, go create really creative stuff, or is it a little bit more, competitive, do you think?
Oh, no, I would say you want people to create, of course you want people to create awesome stuff so that you can enjoy it alongside everybody else.
How difficult is it to get, projects like this off the ground financially? What's the landscape looking like out there for funding projects like this?
I'm afraid, well, you'd have to talk to Chris about that, because I am not a producer per se. They have a hard job for sure. And the Canadian landscape is perhaps not always that inviting, especially to an independent producer. But as I say, Mosaic has had some real successes here in Edmonton with, of course, Tiny Plastic Man and Caution, and they did, of course, Chris Craddock's film, It's Not My Fault, and I Don't Care Anyway, which starred the late Alan Thicke, and that was just shot here last year. So, I think the landscape, again, is not always so forgiving. And again, I wish I had more personal information to relate to you. But people are making a go of it.
Did you ever have a chance to work with Alan Thicke?
Yeah, he was a guest on Tiny Plastic Man, actually.
You know, there's from my perspective, just as a fan, there's a man who, you know, just kept working and grinding it out, and seemed like he was, you know,
and having a good time while doing it too.
I was going to say,
he was fun to work with, and very nice guy. I didn't know him that well. Chris got to work with him more closely when they did the film together. But the TV show is kind of why Alan ended up starring in the film. He was also a very prolific writer of music and jingles and stuff as well.
Is that right?
And theme tunes, yeah.
I had no idea. I mean, of course, it shouldn't surprise me, though, because it seems like just about everybody I talk to in the entertainment industry, regardless of sort of their role, they always seem to have, you know, second, third talents that you just may not be fully aware of. It doesn't surprise me as someone of Alan Thicke's talent has, you know, multiple angles to it. So that's very cool. It is a very big loss to have lost him, and very tragic too, and unexpected. Yeah. I mean, I guess the only thing I suppose that I said when I did was, you know, I mean, he was playing hockey, and of course, you know, I mean, as a Canadian, I mean, that's a Canadian sort of way to go, I suppose, on some level.
I suppose so, yeah.
Yeah. So when you look at 2017 going forward, you know, how does your calendar look in terms of the sort of the projects you've got going on? You just wrapped another season of, you know, one project. You got I assume many things on the go. What's going to be shaping up for you in 2017?
Much the same things as we've talked about previously on the show. The Irrelevant Show, of course, continues. We'll be doing our regular studio recordings, but we're also going on the road and doing a number of recordings in BC this year. So looking forward to that. We've been out to the West Coast before. We had recordings in Vancouver that went very well. So I'm looking forward to that. That'll be fun. Of course, we are currently in the process of editing Caution May Contain Nuts. So that should be airing in the fall, I think. Don't quote me on that particularly, but I think that's the case. And if things go well, we'll be shooting another season of that. So fingers crossed. And of course, there's Dynasty. There's all the improv stuff that I do. My work with Rapid Fire Theatre. I'm actually going to be going to... I just got back from England, where I was doing the London Improvathon, which is a 50-hour improv show. But before that, they also had an improv festival, and I did improvised Dungeons & Dragons, as a matter of fact. And I'll also be doing that with my friends from Dad's Garage Theater in Atlanta, and Mr. Colin Mockery from Whose Line Is It Anyway is also going to be in the show. So I look forward to getting to play improvised Dungeons & Dragons on stage with Colin.
Man, that's, again, another great Canadian funny person, right? So tell me about you head over to London, you do this 50-hour improv show, and you know, we have a little bit different likes and dislikes in terms of comedy between our two cultures. We're connected, obviously, but you know, there's some differences. What kind of differences have you seen, sort of, in terms of what they like to laugh about versus what we like to laugh about?
You know, I'm not sure if there are huge differences with British and Canadian. Actually, have more similarities than differences, I would say, and it's interesting to contrast the British, Canadian, and American senses of humor. I think we have a lot of common ground.
All three of us separated by a common language, obviously.
There is that, of course. Oh, and sorry, I just realized we were talking about upcoming stuff in 2017. I should mention some video game stuff, which the first thing that comes to mind, of course, Slayaway Camp, which is now mobile, so you can get that, but also The Long Dark from Hinterland Studio, which I'm in with Jennifer Hale, actually, and also David Hayter, the voice of Solid Snake. Mm-hmm. And Elias Tufexis, who many folks know as Adam Jensen. So it's a very Canadian game.
Yeah.
We're all Canadian. And it's set in Canada. and it's essentially a survival game, trying to survive in the Canadian North. Very realistic and very unforgiving as well, from what I'm told. And
Wow.
from the bit, I haven't played as much as some people, but it's pretty hard to stay alive in Canada, according to this video game.
Oh, I'm going to have to check it out. So you brought up Jennifer Hale, as you'd mentioned earlier, and as many will know, is the counterpart to Commander Shepard, right?
That's true. And in this game, we actually get to be, of course, we've been in the game together before, but playing the same character. In this game, it's a bit more of a shifting narrative, and I think they've already talked about this, so I'm not giving away too much. But essentially, your perspective, your point of view character will change. So sometimes you might be Jennifer, as controlling Jennifer's character, and sometimes mine. But our characters, for the first time, will actually have a chance to meet and actually have scenes together.
Wow. Oh, yeah. That's interesting. So did that, when you work together in a situation like say Mass Effect, where you have, you're bringing your own sort of talents and personalities on some level, I suppose, to the same role. You can see the fan base online start sort of taking sides between who was the sort of the better or, better Commander Shepard, right? And so, have you and Jennifer ever talked a little bit about that?
Talked about who was better.
Who's the better? I mean, have you, each of you kind of
I have to say, I was a fan of Jennifer's before I even landed this gig, and because she, of course, very prolific. She's one of the busiest voice actors in North America, and her resume is extremely impressive. And she did a lot of work on projects that I was just a fan of already, like a lot of the DC animated stuff. Loved her work on that. Subsequently, I saw her on the Avengers cartoon on Earth's Mightiest Heroes, and I've always admired her. So to get a chance to be in a project with her that was quite humbling, and I will say that she is better because, as I say, she's a great lady.
Well, there you have it, Mass Effect fans. You've had one Commander Shepard give the nod to the other Commander Shepard, and that's...
I will always bow down to Jennifer Hale.
Well, that was probably the smart play regardless, I think, anyways. And I think that nothing against Jennifer Hale at all. I think you both really did a fantastic job regardless. And I think the game itself is just, when it first came out, it was this different look and feel, and of course the approach of having choices to have the game unfold the way you kind of choose to play it is really cool, and certainly has been a cornerstone of the way that game has evolved over time. So it certainly is a big deal, I think. And so when we take a look at you as as an actor, and you think back, if you had a mentor that you could rely on that maybe you don't currently work with, haven't currently worked with, but somebody who you'd like to work with and maybe learn from, and at the risk of, just putting you on the spot, who might you like to work with that you thought you could really learn from?
Well, let's see. One of my favorite voice actors is probably Mr. Mark Hamill.
Mm.
He has done, of course, amazing work on the Batman series and various other media as the Joker. But just the breadth of his voice work is amazing. And he, what was the thing? Oh, the audiobook of World War Z. He is great on that. I really enjoyed it.
Really? Wow.
And also he's Luke Skywalker. So,
I mean, I was just going to say it starts and ends with that, I think, as far as, but no, yeah, absolutely. That would be that's a great answer because.
But I would say that his Joker, I would say, is almost as big an impact on me as Luke Skywalker.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's big praise.
But I've always liked the bad guys.
Yeah, well, that's fair. I mean, there are people out there who want to be the renegades, if you will, all the time. So no, that's a great answer. So if you were a a younger actor, just again going back into your sort of high school mind for a minute, right? And you have today's experience and you have today's success, but you can go back and talk to that younger version of yourself and say, go and do lots of this. To develop your career, you should be doing lots of this. I didn't do this when I was your age or the first time around, but do this now. What would that be?
Play more Dungeons and Dragons.
More D&D, eh?
There were a few campaigns we didn't get through.
Fair enough. Well, that makes a lot of sense considering how things have unfolded for you. In terms of, younger actors, though, in Canada, what are some of the types of work that they should strive to do to just hone their craft?
Well, as I mentioned, I always recommend improvisation. It's a great tool that and the skills that it teaches you, as I mentioned before, can be applied to almost any branch of acting. And I just say, I've got a soft spot for improv. It's the theater I'm most interested in.
So when if you ever had let's call it a scary day on set, and if so, what happened?
A scary day on set?
Mm-hmm. Or on stage?
I don't know.
Something that happened that you weren't...
Because this happens. I've been on sets where there have been accidents and people, rush to hospital and things like that to get stitches or whatnot. I don't know. Nothing in particular stands out as
nobody where you were expecting to go on stage and then you found out somebody was in the audience you weren't expecting, you thought was, whoa, this was, wow, or anything like that?
No, generally I don't generally get stage fright. I do get excited to go on stage, but not so much in terms of stage fright.
Okay, one final question for you before we let you get on with the rest of your day. If your character, Commander Shepard, was going to be replaced in Mass Effect by a Muppet character, which one would you hope would be your replacement? Okay.
I would say I'll need to pick two, because I'll say Kermit for Paragon and Animal for Renegade.
Yeah, that's pretty bang on, I would think. You've got Kermit, who's pretty straight-laced, obviously, and then you've got Animal, who's absolutely the renegade of the Muppets, no doubt about it. Mark...
Possibly Sweetums. Or wait, no, actually Rex would be Sweetums.
Yeah, that would be an interesting scenario just to have play out. Mark, thank you so much for coming on to the FuseLogic podcast and allowing me to fire all these questions at you and help us understand a bit more about what it's like to be a great voice actor, improvist, writer, and Canadian actor in general.
You're far too kind.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Walter.
That was Mark Meer, Commander Shepard of Mass Effect, but of course he's got so many different other characters that Mark does, obviously, and we were actually very fortunate to hear about all the different projects. He's obviously incredibly busy, and that's I think the way to do it. If you're an actor or a writer, you got to stay busy doing something, creating something, just to stay sharp, if nothing else. But obviously Mark has got a great career on the way, and it's just a real pleasure to have him on the show. Some of the things that I've learned about this, of course, is that when you talk to someone as talented as a Mark Meer is, and not afraid to sort of stick to his passions on things like Dungeons and Dragons, and then turn that into role playing that really gets him paid, either on the video game front or just on stage doing really cool improv and things like that. Follow your passion, what you find interesting, and I think that that's something we can all learn from. It's a lot of dynamic things going on in the Edmonton area where we are, out in the northern part of Alberta. For those folks who are listening who don't necessarily know the region, this is a wonderful place, and you really should come visit, take in some live theater, check out a lot of the different theater troupes that are companies that are doing great work and in and around the city. So I really do appreciate, again, Mark coming on and sharing a lot of these great stories. I wish we had more time to spend with him. I want to thank one of our FuseLogic clients for their support. Barbara Steckley at Preferred Client Services Group is an amazing bookkeeping service, and they are pretty much, bar none, the best in the city without a doubt. But I want to thank Barbara for her support in being a FuseLogic client, and I want to thank Thomas Brabeck at Octavo Productions for all of his technical skills and wizardry, getting the great music on this show and pulling it all together for us. Thank you, Thomas, for doing that. You can check out the FuseLogic podcast at fuselogic.com. Look for the podcast button and listen to all of our great episodes there. Of course, we're This is episode 3 in season 2, so we're well on our way here in 2017. And I want to thank you very, very much once again for listening to us and tuning in on a regular basis to hear this podcast. It's a lot of fun to put together for you. We really appreciate your feedback and your insights and your recommendations for folks that we should interview and have on the show. Thank you so very much. I'm your host, Walter Schwabe, and remember, you're made to thrive.